I'm still learning all this, you guys. Welcome to the Polish the Mirror podcast, episode number 3. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Amy Thurman, your host, and for the past 10 years, I have lived with a broken neck. But even in the midst of that, I have been able to gain hope through all of the struggle, through all of the trauma, through all of the pain. I have been able to find hope, and I am able to use my story to help other people. And so that's the purpose of this podcast, is to allow people a safe place to be able to share their stories of adversity, of things that they have been through, and we're able to find hope in the midst of it. Now, along with the neck injury came a traumatic brain injury. So if you hear me stumble over words or if you hear me get hung up, it's just part of that. I appreciate your grace as we go through this, because that happens sometimes, or it may not happen at all. So I want to bring that to your attention as well. So here we are, episode number 3. This is so exciting. Okay, let me introduce you to my guest today. This is my friend, Melissa Price. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amy. I'm delighted to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Melissa and I have done a few chats together. She was on my series of 100 Days, 100 Emotions, and had a wonderful chat with her there. If you want to find that series, go to hashtag 100 Days, 100 Emotions. That's the number 100. It was streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and you can go find that there. But you will definitely want to know more about Melissa, especially after we have this conversation with her today. So, like I said, the purpose of this podcast is to help people have a safe place to share their stories of things that they've been through, things that they've experienced, and been able to find hope in the midst of it. For those of you who are watching live, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and we will try to address them as we're here live. So, Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to just share whatever you want to share about the adversity that you have been through and how you have found hope in the midst of that.
Okay. Well, I am a mom and a grandma, and those things are not only super important to me today, but they were always a dream of mine when I was young. And that was despite the way that I grew up. So I grew up in an abusive household. I lived in fear of my father's anger. And, he'd had a rough childhood himself and been abandoned by his dad when he was 5. And just, we all have our backstory, right? And my backstory is just a father who didn't know how to be a father and didn't know how to manage his emotions. And he had addictions that affected me as well. So I grew up being a good girl, I guess, because I didn't want to get in trouble and get hurt. So I learned to be very aware of how he was feeling, so I knew how to act so that I could stay safe. When I was 9, I started going to church with friends. My parents hadn't really taught me anything about God, but I got a set of scriptures when I was 9, and I read them cover to cover twice. I don't know what 9-year-old does that, but
wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that started a seed of identity with me. That really has been a foundation of hope for me. But at the age of 9, between 9 and 12, my father escalated his abuse, and it was just a yucky time. School would be normal. I'd be so grateful to get out of the house and be safe there. But about the age of 12, my parents divorced and my father was no longer in the home. And that was my first taste of freedom, which was great. And I could tell he was going to continue to abuse us. And so I just had to tell my mom some things that she didn't know, and she took action. And my father went to prison. And then I felt really free in some ways.
I imagine. So even though, excuse me, they were divorced, you still were seeing him because
Yeah.
your mom didn't know any of this was happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, she knew of some of it, but not all the extent. So, um, I'm grateful that she took the action that she did, but it was very tumultuous to say the least. Like, it was great to
Imagine.
have not to worry about it, but then all of a sudden my emotions were free to surface, and that was rough. Like, I was
Oh my
already a
gosh.
teenager, and
Yeah.
all the hormones and all those fun things going on, right? Um, and I just started erupting in anger. And I wouldn't say it was anything abnormal for a teenager, but for me, it was pretty devastating because I had, and this is pretty subconscious at this point, but I had um, been at the brunt of my father's anger for a long time. And so when I started feeling angry and it would come out, whether I would yell at my family or usually I would do something kind of self-destructive. I might like rip up a favorite book because I loved books. They were my escape. And so to rip up a
Oh, I
book
bet.
was like just getting that energy out. I didn't know how to get it out in very productive ways. It wasn't terrible ways, but it wasn't feeling good for me. And I just hated this part of myself that was angry because I was like, anger is bad. Anger equals bad. I'm a bad
Well,
person.
yeah, that's what you had grown up with.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Do you have any siblings?
I have one sibling. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when you said you got the brunt of the anger, I just wondered if there were others involved too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sibling suffered the same things. Um, mhm.
So you're learning how to deal with this anger as a teenager,
Well, I
trying
was
to figure it all out.
I don't know that I figured it out then. I knew that I didn't want to take it out on others. And so most of the time it was just like, slamming my bedroom doors or like hitting a wall with my fists or, that type of thing. But inside, I just, it made me so mad that I was so mad, and I had no
Yes.
idea why, because my anger never erupted before because of how controlled my childhood was. And so to have it just coming out, and I had no idea what the purpose of anger was. I had no clue. I just thought it was a bad thing. And so I I hated that part of myself, and I would get mad at myself for getting mad. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And I'm thinking like right now you have this sense of freedom that I no longer have to be subjected to this form of anger from my father. Now
yes.
it's coming from within me. Like it's erupting from within me. I'm sure that had to be so confusing and yes, make you upset and because you should have with that feeling of freedom should have come so many different emotions, right?
Yeah. And I probably had joy that I could like do some things I wanted to do. Like I remember the first time after my parents divorced that I opened the refrigerator on my own because I was hungry. I had never done that before, and I was 12.
Wow.
And I just
Oh my
remember
word.
I have choices, like there's grapes. Am I hungry for grapes? Like it was just a new thing to
Mm,
me. And so it was a good time. It was a learning time, but it was also somewhat devastating. And I did with my anger what a lot of people still do because we weren't really taught emotional intelligence maybe by our parents, and their parents didn't teach them. It just is a generational thing.
right.
Known a lot about it until lately. And so um, I did what I observed other people around me do, which was either stuff it and hide it, which I did my best to do. So if I was angry, I would just, keep smiling. And that reminds me of a story I'll tell you in a minute. But
Yeah.
I, I just, I would stuff it until I exploded, right? And we see people doing that. We see our kids doing that still, right? They don't. like emotions are uncomfortable, some of them that we would term negative. I don't think they're negative now. But the
Yes.
emotions that are uncomfortable, we do our very best to avoid by turning to comfort. And
Right.
so I turned to food. I gained a little bit of weight in junior high. That was pretty normal. I was pretty normal weight, but I noticed it and I was just like, dang, and then um, we turned to books. Like I was already turned to books. So I did that. I loved Friends. So that's something healthy that I would, turn to. But a lot of times we turn and to bad habits and become addictions when we don't know what to do with our emotions. And
Mhm.
I absolutely think
So
that's
good.
my father, right? And
Mhm.
it happens to all of us. We all have our own favorite addictions that may or may not be very good for us. And sometimes they turn to really like hurt ourselves or hurt others. Um, and as and as I've grown up and as I've done a lot of healing, I became a mom who homeschooled, and these teens talk to me and they would come to me and say, "Hey, I have this addiction. I have this addiction. I'm fighting pornography. And I'm very familiar with being the brunt end of that." And I was just like, "Oh, I know where this is going. I know how it destroys families and relationships and self-esteem and brings shame and guilt and so anyway, that's kind of my life's work now, is to help get that emotional intelligence out there, help not only our kids and our teens to understand the role of emotions and how they can help move us forward, but help their moms be able to teach their kids, because a lot of us didn't have the greatest role models and our parents did the best we could. I did the best I could and I still messed up my kids, right? So,
I feel the same way.
sorry, guys,
And
but we're all just here on this earth to learn, so it's all a good thing eventually, but it can be tough. Like
yeah.
even though I knew from a very young age I was not going to abuse my kids. Like that was just like I knew that. At the same time, I was still struggling with all of these feelings. And I would say like my core wound that came from the abuse, like way deep down below everything, is I don't matter. My needs don't
Mhm.
matter, my preferences don't matter, like so whenever somebody ignores me or I think they're ignoring me or says something unkind or whatever it is, I have had to do a lot of work to not get down to the, "Oh my gosh, I don't matter." Right?
It's so interesting because all of our experiences make us see the world from a different perspective. I'm
Mm,
just thinking of an instance where two of my closest friends, we had something happened where I turned inward because I don't that's what happens to me. I I don't say things because I'm afraid I'll say something I will regret, so I just turn inward until I can process it and work through it, and then I can talk about it.
yeah,
But my friend said, "Please stop ignoring me. The fact that you're ignoring me is making me feel really bad about myself." And it wasn't, it really opened my eyes because it wasn't that I was trying to ignore her. It was that I was processing it myself so that then I could talk about it. But from her perspective, the way she grew up, exactly what you said, she felt like I was ignoring her, and being ignored was something that was traumatic for her when she was young. And
yeah,
so that's so important that we know that everybody's dealing with something in their lives from some way, shape, or form from a different perspective. And just because we do something or say something from and intend it one way doesn't mean that that's how it's received on the other end.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful mess that we all are because we have these amazing emotions, like you love to talk about emotions, so I'll throw this in here. Like we have these
Yeah.
amazing emotions that are here, they color our lives. They are the reason we have choices to make. we didn't feel emotions, we might not go for the things that we want because we wouldn't want them because we wouldn't know how great they are or the lack of, whatever it is. So emotions are amazing and they are a challenge because like I can feel excited if a dog's running towards me because I've had experience with dogs, but you've got a little kid and a dog's running towards him, and he has no experience, he's going to be terrified. So we're all experiencing emotions in the same situations in completely different ways, depending on where we've been and what we've seen and experienced. So it's complicated.
It's very complicated.
I
And,
try my best to simplify it.
yes. And, you're talking about emotions earlier about stuffing them down, that when you were under the influence of your dad, that
Mhm.
you pretty much stuffed down your anger because you had to stay safe. But then that anger surfaced when you were no longer in that situation. And I feel like that's something that happens to us, all of us, that we don't really realize, that we are constantly stuffing down our emotions, trying to push them down so that they won't surface, when the opposite is what needs to happen. You got me talking about emotions, so I'm going off here. You know, I love to talk about emotions, but when the opposite is what needs to happen, like they need to be able to surface to serve their purpose. And research have shown, you probably know this, Melissa, that when an emotion comes in, that if we don't hold on to it, if we allow it to serve its purpose and move on, it will stay an average of 90 seconds.
Yeah.
So if we get angry, if we allow that anger to approach and we feel it and then we allow it to go, 90 seconds. But if we hold on to it and grab it and keep it and be like, oh, I want to hold on to this, then it lasts as long as we're going to hold on to it. So
Mhm.
emotions are fascinating. I could talk about them all day long, but we need to move on. However, this has a lot to do with you and all that you learned about emotions in going through this adversity in your life, because you turned what you learned from emotions, you gathered that and turned it into something really, really amazing. So please tell us about that.
Okay. Um, so as a young mom, I started doing therapy. Like I just really wanted to get a handle on things because I didn't want to take my upsets into my parenting. And so I watched a lot of Oprah back in the day. She was my therapist.
Same. Oh yeah, me too.
And and all the guests that she had on were really fascinating. So I read a lot of the books that came up and just started kind of my healing journey back then in earnest, I guess. And and I've had some time in the last 10 years as my children have gotten to the age where they're pretty independent at that point. I started going to healing retreats and just a lot of seminars on understanding myself because I love people. I love to understand them. And I love to understand myself because then I can see what I need to do to get better. That's just like really innate in me.
I
So
love that.
in that process, I've learned like what the life cycle of an emotion looks like and how it's supposed to work versus how we've just culturally learned to deal with our emotions. And so it's exciting to learn that like every emotion has a message to teach us. And we need to find the appropriate ways to move that emotional energy out of our body, that chemical feeling that we have for the 90 seconds, before we get to the point where we can figure out that message. And when I was a teen, I thought I was so mature, I guess, because if my friends and I would have like maybe a typical teenage fight. And then I would come to them and I would say, okay, you felt this way. And then I felt this way. And this is how we can like heal it. So if you do this and I do this, and they would just look at me and they would be like, Yeah, okay. No, but I mean, we would have stayed mad for 3 days, but I was just like, "Why do that?" So I
Right.
to intellectualizing it, but not getting those emotions out still, like, that energy was still trapped in my body, and,
Ah,
when that emotional energy that we ignore for so long, then we're causing our pains and our illnesses in our body, and so, um, and we can turn to those addictions. I don't wanna do that, so,
right.
anyway, I've learned, like, along the way that connection is the opposite to addiction.
Mm,
And connection is like my favorite value. Like that's who I am. I love connecting ideas and people and all the things. And I just connect everything to like learning, right? So so I was asked a few years ago to teach a mom's group with really young kids about how to help their young kids manage their emotions. And I usually do the like teen junior high thing. So I was trying to wrap my brains around, okay, so how can I like really simplify this and help them out?
right.
And I had the idea for a game. And
Make it
I
interactive.
yeah, I made the
Right.
game up in 3 hours and I was like, all
Holy
right, well,
cow.
this with these families, so I started playing the game around with people and realized it was like a legit thing. So I had to
Like,
actually,
this really works.
yeah, it really works. And I had a lot of intention as I created the game. And I discovered like just like a godsend of things that it teaches that I was not aware of. And I was like, this is amazing. So
I love that. Like, I gotta stop here for just a second and say, things like this are just amazing to me, but, like, they are just meant to be. Like, you you set out the intention, you got the idea, you put it together, and oh my gosh, what an amazing thing. I just love that so much. Alright, time in. You go I was like, "Time out, just a second. Okay, time in."
yes. So, where were we?
I know, I'm sorry. I told you my
No,
brain does this funny thing.
it's fine. So,
You
yeah,
created the game in 3 hours, and it actually worked.
it did. Yeah, it's a card game, and I created it for, young kids and for, like, teens. I had them in mind when I created it, and then I had some dear friends who are empty nesters who were like, "We're gonna come down and play your game with you." I was, like, a little embarrassed. I was like, "Well, it's a kids game, but okay." So they came down and we played, and we were dying laughing for, like, an hour, and I was like, "Oh, it's not just a kids game, like, adults love this game?"
Yes.
And it was really fun because, like, in that young moms group, I said, "So I kinda created this game, and I'm just wondering, like, how long would you guys play a game with your kids?" Because I'm just trying to figure out what suggested, playtime would be, and they're like, "We don't wanna play a game with our kids more than 20 minutes." And granted, they're playing with, 5-year-olds who are playing Candyland. I mean, 20 minutes to
Yeah.
Candyland is a long time, right? And so I was like, "Alright." So the very first family I played with, the mom was the one who had said, like, no more than 20 minutes.
Mhm.
I got out my game. I'm like, "Play this with me. Let's see how it works." And, we played for an hour, and the kids had to go
Oh
to
my
bed, or we
gosh.
probably would have played longer, and
Wow.
it was amazing. Like, I remember seeing the dad's jaw just drop as he watched his kids portray these
Yeah.
emotions, and, um, it was it was, like, one of the best days of my life, so fun. In fact, I started playing the game with everybody I could. I walk through my neighborhood and say, "Okay, just pick a card," you know?
Test it
And
out.
I know, and, uh, I remember the first time, like, I sold my game and I wasn't gonna be playing it with the people like I had and I just felt so jealous, like, but I always get to play the game with people. It's not fair that you're playing it without me. It's so fun.
Oh.
So I'm kind of in love with my creation.
Oh, it's so I mean, I just cannot say enough about this game because I want you to explain a little bit about what it
Okay.
is and how it works because it's so fascinating. I obviously am a big proponent of emotions, but
Yeah.
I have studied emotional intelligence for a long, long time. And as a former educator, know firsthand that that is not something that's taught. Like parents don't know, like you said, parents don't know how to teach it because they haven't been taught. Teachers don't have time to teach it because they have so many other responsibilities. And to put it in the form of a game is so effective because kids actually want to play it. And you have said this to me before. They don't realize what they're learning when they're learning it
Mhm.
because it's so fun and interactive and they're just having a good time. They don't realize all the things that they're learning. So please share with us how it works and some things that they learn.
All right. So my game is called Emotion Commotion, and it's really a little bit goofy
But it's so
and
fun.
very simple. I love that you don't have to read a long manual to play my game. It takes 30 seconds to learn. So you have an action card and an emotion card, and you do the action. The action for this card is to say, "Can you pass me the bacon?" And then you do the emotion. So you do the action in the emotion. So if I were
All
to
right.
say, "Can
I'm
you
going to
pass
stop
me
you
the
for
bacon?"
just a second so
Yes.
I can explain to people who are listening and not watching
Yes.
that she's holding up an orange card, and on the back of the orange card is the action, and then on the green card, the back of the green card is the emotion with which you're supposed to enact the action. So
Mhm.
we have amused, and what was the action?
Just say, "Can you pass me the bacon?" I chose that because if people can't see us, then they can at least hear my tone of voice, right?
Yes,
So I'll choose
yes.
a different emotion now that you've seen that emotion card. I'll choose a different one for you. I have light green cards and dark green cards, so there's easier emotions and more complex ones for like if you're
Oh,
playing with
good.
little kids. So let's see if you can guess the emotion by just hearing my voice. Can you pass me the bacon?
Frustrated,
Ha! Good for you.
agitated. Is
No,
frustrated? Oh,
you get it on the first try.
yeah. Hey, I
Fantastic.
recognize that tone.
Right?
I know that tone.
I know. Okay, we're gonna let you do one.
Okay.
You need to make the sound of a sheep.
Oh gosh.
Okay, we're only
Okay.
putting the sounding ones on right here for the people who can't see anything, right?
Okay.
And then
Sound
I'm
of a
gonna
sheep.
pick an emotion. Um, oh, let's see if you can do this one. Okay.
Oh, the sound of a sheep goes
Mm.
uh baa baa. My emotion was confident. I had to make the sound of a sheep and sound confident. That's how a confident sheep sounds, right?
It is. So
So yes, it's amusing.
yeah, and there's a lot of different actions like playing the air guitar or um, pretend you're playing golf. Show it just with your face or just with your walk. Lots of different things that I isolated because these are just little pieces of how we pick up on how other people share their emotions, and so it gives us the opportunity to kind of zoom in on a little part of it. Um, and then I love as we play because, for the people who can't see, they are able to hear by tone of voice. And that's one of the things
Yes.
that we can practice as we play this game is listening to tone of voice, watching others' body language. This is a big way that we pick up on others' emotions. And we're not all good at it, right? Some of us
Right.
really have a hard time with it, and some of us don't. But even like I believe that if we suffer abuse, a lot of times the kids that come out of that have gained a lot of empathy because of how they're so aware of the emotions going on in their home. And so, while I think that I'm pretty good at picking up how other people feel, I've learned playing this game that I can't assume anything, because
Mhm.
some people might have really like out loud wanting to yell, bursting anger, and some people have very quiet, seething anger, right? Some people you
Yeah.
can't even tell they're angry because they maybe have learned to mask it so well, or maybe just haven't had a ton of anger in their lives. I don't know who hasn't, but um,
Right. Yeah.
and so you see as you play this whole gamut of emotions, and you realize really quickly and can gain some compassion by thinking, okay, I'm not picking up on what other people are laying down all the time. So maybe I can get curious. I can ask questions instead of assuming, even the people I know really well, like what they're feeling. Just because it looks like me doesn't mean that's exactly what they're feeling.
Yes. And
And
this, like, my son is autistic, and
Mhm.
so that's something they really struggle with is learning social cues and understanding, tone of voice, that kind of thing. So this will be so helpful for kids
It
like
is.
that too.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. And so we get to practice that every time we're playing. We get to expand our emotional vocabulary, which is so important. Like, they have found that most adults have 8 to 10 go-to words to describe how they feel. So I'm
Mhm.
frustrated, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, whatever our 8 to 10 words are that we use over and over again. That's what we model for our kids. And there are thousands upon thousands of emotion words.
Right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
so if we can help ourselves and our kids have a bigger emotional vocabulary, then when they're feeling an emotion, they'll be better able to name the right one and get the right message. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And so the example I like to use is like if you have two siblings, one has the last ice cream cone and the other one doesn't get ice cream, they might think, oh my gosh, that's not fair. I'm so mad. And anger in general, not all the time, but in general, is about boundaries that have been crossed. Something is wrong. And there's not something wrong with your sibling having an ice cream cone, but to you, it definitely means something's wrong, right? But
Right.
if you understand they have a big enough vocabulary to say, oh, I'm jealous, they have something that I want. So how can I get that for myself? That's the message jealousy usually has, is like, okay, if there's something that I really want that I see, then how can I get that for myself? Or is it best for me to get that for myself? What can I do? And a lot of us weren't taught to get to that point where we're looking for the messages in the situation to help us. Because if we take one step to move forward in answer to that message, we're we're one step closer to being the most awesome us we can be. So
Right.
I
Yes.
want that expanded emotional vocabulary for all of us. And as people guess, not everybody guesses on the first try like you did. um, but we have all these synonyms that are thrown out. So I have 40 something cards in my deck of emotions, but you're hearing, by the time you're done playing a game, 100, 200 different guesses. And so you're really expanding that vocabulary, which I love. And then
Yeah.
I love that it kind of walks us through the beginnings of emotional regulation. So we pick up an emotion card, we allow ourselves to feel it without judgment, and then we move that energy out through the talking or the singing or the acting or whatever it is. And that's so important. And those are some steps that we don't always learn to do. We don't always allow ourselves to feel the emotions without judging. Like when I was younger,
Mhm.
I judged anger as bad. So I was like, ooh, I can't feel this emotion. That's not cool. Um,
Right.
and so I love that as we play, we just realize we all can get in touch with these emotions to some extent. We've all felt them. It
Mhm.
it's something we all have in common, and
It's
um,
normal.
it's fun
Yeah.
to play with in a healthy way. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think my favorite thing about the game is that as you play, you're playing in this safe space that's created because it's just a game, and you're allowing yourself to share your emotions with other people safely. And that's
Yeah.
going to help us when we're really in trouble, because then we're like, wait a minute, everybody feels these emotions. I can be safe to share that part of me. So let's find somebody that it's safe to share with, because we are losing people left and right. It's awful
Mm,
because they get so overwhelmed with their emotions. And sometimes our
right.
younger kids don't know that it's going to go away, that it's not going to last forever. And
Wow.
we want them to know that they can come to us. We want to be that safe place, to where they can say, "Hey, I have this rage inside me, and I don't know what to do with it, and I want to take myself out before I hurt people." Or I mean,
Yeah.
just one circumstance, but like let's make it normal to share our emotions. And I could just put this game on the shelf and say it's fun, but like it's so important to me, and I really appreciate you letting me share what it teaches, because I want parents and grandmas and bosses to be able to facilitate discussions if they come
And
up,
teachers,
and
teachers,
teachers.
like this could be played in the classroom too.
Yes, I've played in the classroom. I taught 3rd through 8th grades a couple years ago in a homeschool class, and I made my own curriculum and threw all the like healing stuff in there, like let's learn the power of words and let's learn all about our emotions and all the things. And so as I'm teaching these different ages, like I found different ways to use this game to facilitate different types of learning. But they love it so much, every week they would beg to play it. And so it became a reward. If we get through this week's lesson,
Yeah.
time we'll play it. So you can play this game for 10 minutes. You can play it for 2 hours, as I've found out with adults at business retreats. Um, I've played it in prison. In fact, this last week I got to play it with 2 different classes in prison. And it's
Wow.
amazing. I mean, most of them are there because their emotions got out of hand, and they
Exactly.
didn't know what to do
Yes.
with them, and maybe they had addictions that led them. So it's
Right.
it's it's something we all deal with, and we all, can use the help and the fun. Like, let's laugh and get our energy, emotional energy out, right? That's my favorite way to get
Yes.
crying is good too, but laughing is great too. So,
Yes. Oh, I love it so much because it's so powerful. Like
yes,
we underestimate, I think, the power of this because of
yes,
the fun nature, that
yes.
there is an underlying power to it that I really, really want to bring to everyone's attention. And that you heard Melissa say how many ways this can be used with all age groups in all kinds of different situations and scenarios, because it's something we all deal with. We all have emotions. It's a part of being human. It's normal. But to be
Yes.
able to learn to deal with them in a fun way, oh my gosh, is so powerful. So, Melissa, thank you so, so much for being here. I would love for you to share, excuse me, how they can get your game or get in touch with you.
All right. You can go to my website. It's emotioncommotiongame.com. And I have my game, and I also created some connection questions, which you can use for like junior high, elementary kids, that help you talk about emotions, but in a really fun way. And I also have a something free that if you are interested in, it's like 3 different ways to get that emotional energy out, but kind of in an artistic way. So, um, and they work for all ages. I've used it at school. I use it for myself and at women's retreats. So
Hmm.
there are just some really great tools to get that energy out before you get the message from your emotions.
Oh, I love that so much. So, yes, that's www.emotioncommotioнгame.com. I will put the link in the show notes. I have the link in the description if you're watching live, so you can connect with Melissa there, find the game there, find her freebies there. And oh my goodness, so much value today. Melissa, thank you again for being here and for sharing your story, for being vulnerable and willing to share the adversity and then the hope that you gained and the way that you used it to help others. It makes my heart so, so happy to see this. Oh my gosh, this is what lights my fire right here.
You know? I love to geek out about emotions,
Oh,
especially with you,
you
Amy.
know,
It's fun.
I do too. Like that's one thing she and I talk about a lot. So we could carry on all day, but if excuse me, you're interested, if you or someone you know is interested in sharing your story of adversity and hope that you gained through that, feel free to email me. It's Amy, AMY, at getamyshelp.com, GETAMYSHELP.com. And then I also have a freebie for you if you're interested. I have created 10 steps to showing yourself self-love, and you can find that at my website, www.getamyshelp.com/free. And I'll put those in the show notes as well and in the description. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have found this helpful and think it will be helpful for others, please share it. If you feel that it's worth a 5-star rating on your podcast listening platform, please give us 5-star ratings so that we can reach other people and help them as well. So thank you again. And I will be back next week with another interview and another story of hope gained in the midst of adversity. Thank you.